Athens thrives in the 4th century BC, a city of abstract genius and public philosophy. Yet, the man who would define Western structure, Aristotle, was born far north in Stagira, a frontier town on the Chalcidic Peninsula. This identity as a Macedonian metic foreshadowed his lifelong tension with Athenian culture. Born in 384 BC, Aristotle inherited a distinct worldview from his father, Nicomachus, King Amyntas III's physician. The Asclepiadae tradition taught meticulous, hands-on observation of the human body, prioritizing empirical data over abstract speculation. Nicomachus instilled a profound respect for the material world, teaching the young Aristotle to reason from the particular symptom to the general diagnosis. This grounding in practical biological science contrasted sharply with the theoretical philosophy dominating southern Greece. Tragedy struck early when both parents died, leaving Aristotle in the care of his guardian, Proxenus. This early loss forced him to rely on court connections and developed his sharp understanding of social and political power dynamics and hierarchies. Recognizing Aristotle's intellect, Proxenus made a pivotal decision in 367 BC. At age 17, the pragmatic young man embarked on the journey south, leaving volatile Macedonia for the intellectual beacon of the Hellenic world, Plato's Academy. He arrived in Athens as a fusion of conflicting intellectual worlds. His biological heritage favored inductive, bottom-up knowledge, while Plato's Academy prized deductive, top-down reasoning from transcendent, universal forms. This deep tension became the engine of his genius. He sought to reconcile the Athenian search for universal truth with the physician's conviction that those truths must be found here on earth, within the observable reality of the world around us. For 2 decades, starting in 367 BC, Aristotle lived and studied within Plato's esteemed academy. It functioned less as a formal school and more as an intense intellectual brotherhood dedicated to dialectic and Socratic questioning. Under Plato's guidance, Aristotle thrived, quickly distinguishing himself as a voracious learner and intellect. Plato reportedly lauded him as the mind of the school, acknowledging his scholarly prowess and dedication. Transitioning from student to respected colleague, Aristotle began crafting and publishing elegant, exoteric dialogues for a wide audience. Works like the Protriptychus cemented his literary fame, earning him praise for his river of gold prose. These early writings reflected a loyal Platonist, championing the immortality of the soul and the existence of transcendent, perfect forms. This brilliant, early literary Aristotle is now almost completely lost to history. Yet an intellectual schism was silently brewing beneath the surface of his loyalty. Aristotle's empirical respect for the senses found Plato's theory of forms, that the physical world is merely a shadow, increasingly untenable. His focus shifted decisively from the abstract heavens to the tangible earth. He concluded that true reality or substance lay not in transcendent forms, but in the concrete objects experienced through the senses. This horse, this tree, this man. This shift represented a complete inversion of the established worldview. Plato's knowledge was deductive, top-down, starting from universal principles. Aristotle was forging an inductive, bottom-up method. This great philosophical divorce marks the symbolic beginning of the scientific mindset. Aristotle insisted on changing the fundamental question from what reality lies behind this world to how can we systematically understand the world we actually experience. The break became final upon Plato's death in 347 BC, when leadership passed to Plato's nephew, Speusippus. confirming the Academy's strict Platonist direction. Aristotle left Athens feeling philosophically alienated. Political dangers also prompted his flight. Rising anti-Macedonian sentiment made Athens unsafe for the man with deep connections to Philip II's court. The student returned as an exile, an intellectual revolutionary searching for a new base. Leaving Athens behind, Aristotle traveled east to Assos in Asia Minor, finding patronage under his friend Hermias, a fellow former student. This stable environment allowed him to begin formulating his own burgeoning empirical philosophy. During his time in Assos, 347–345 BC, Aristotle married Pythias, the niece of Hermias, establishing a stable personal life. This consolidation allowed him to focus intensely on developing his non-Platonic system. The most fruitful scientific period began when Aristotle and his student Theophrastus relocated to the island of Lesbos. The serene, biodiverse Pirha Lagoon became his first practical, natural laboratory. Wading in the shallow waters, observing teeming marine life, Aristotle applied his empirical method, fundamentally becoming the father of biology. This was a period of revolutionary, intense scientific endeavor. He undertook the first systematic study of life, involving meticulous observation, collection, and detailed dissection of numerous animals. Ancient sources credit him with classifying hundreds of species. His surviving biological works are filled with astonishingly accurate observations, such as describing the complex hectocotyle arm of the octopus used in reproduction and the careful parental care of the catfish. He documented the meticulous development of the chick embryo day by day, demonstrating a clear focus on understanding the inherent processes and purpose, telos, within living organisms. During this research, Aristotle forged his foundational concept of the four causes: material, formal, efficient, and crucially, final, purpose, a conceptual toolkit derived directly from biological study. He conceptualized growth as a transition from potentiality, the acorn, to actuality, the oak, deriving this metaphysical framework from the observable, practical processes of natural change. This period on Lesbos cemented his doctrine of hylomorphism. Every living thing is an inseparable unity of its physical matter and its organizing form. His entire metaphysics emerged as a generalization of his biology. Deeply moved by Hermias's virtuous end, Aristotle composed a loyal hymn in his honor, celebrating his friend's commitment to philosophy. This act, however, would later be weaponized against him. In 343 BC, Aristotle received the most momentous invitation of his career from King Philip II of Macedon. Returned to his homeland to tutor the 13-year-old heir, Alexander. Philip strategically chose Aristotle due to his family's long-standing connection to the Macedonian court, offering the philosopher an unprecedented chance to implement the ideal of an enlightened ruler. The tutoring did not take place in Pella's court, but in the secluded, serene environment of the Temple of the Nymphs at Myasa, where Aristotle designed a comprehensive curriculum for the young prince. The curriculum cultivated intellect and character, spanning rhetoric, politics, and natural sciences, but centered on Homeric epic poetry. Aristotle prepared an annotated Iliad that Alexander always cherished. For several years, the relationship was respectful, with Aristotle molding the boy of destiny into a ruler embodying Greek reason and justice, modeled on the heroic ideal of Achilles. Aristotle's influence was evident in Alexander's lifelong fascination with medicine and empirical biology. The future conqueror sent botanists and zoologists from his campaigns back to his old teacher. As Alexander matured, a deep philosophical chasm emerged. Aristotle, championing the polis, advised treating Greeks as leaders and non-Greeks as despots, promoting cultural separation. Alexander pursued the opposite policy, envisioning a vast cosmopolitan empire fusing Greek and Persian cultures. He adopted foreign dress and demanded proskynesis, rejecting his teacher's narrow distinctions. Their deep estrangement fueled ancient rumors that Aristotle, horrified by the tyrannical monster Alexander had become, was complicit in the emperor's mysterious death via potent poison in 323 BC. In 335 BC, at age 50, Aristotle returned to an Athens politically subdued under Macedonian control, a reality that made his return possible despite his foreign status as a resident alien, metic. Barred from owning land, Aristotle rented space in a public gymnasium outside the city walls dedicated to Apollo Lyceus and founded his school, the Lyceum. The school became known as the Peripatetic School, named for his distinctive style of teaching while walking with students along the covered pathways, or peripatoi, engaging them in mobile discussion. The Lyceum was a revolutionary model, intentionally contrasting with the abstract academy. It became the world's first research institute, emphasizing empirical, cooperative study, and data collection. Its ethos mirrored Aristotle's method: knowledge must be built from the ground up, not merely deduced. Students were assigned massive, collaborative projects to gather raw data. The most famous project involved collecting and analyzing the constitutions of 158 Greek city-states, providing the unprecedented empirical bedrock for his great work, the Poetics. Aristotle, the first great bibliophile, assembled the first major library in European history. It was systematically organized as a functional working tool and repository for ongoing research. Supported by Alexander's patronage, the Lyceum established the world's first known zoo and botanical garden. This living library provided specimens crucial for his continued biological research. The Lyceum's institutional structure, data collection, research projects, and comprehensive library was a physical argument for the empirical method. Knowledge is discovered through painstaking investigation. For 12 years, this remarkable institution flourished. It was during this second Athenian period that Aristotle composed or finalized the majority of his profound, surviving esoteric treatises. The physical site of this intellectual revolution was rediscovered in the heart of modern Athens in 1996, a tangible link to the man who institutionalized systematic scientific inquiry. Aristotle's immense body of work, composed largely of dense lecture notes, maps existence through the central concept of telos, or purpose. Understanding anything means asking, what is it for? Before mapping the world, Aristotle invented the tool for thinking, formal logic. His 6 works, later collected as the Organon, the tool, provided a complete system for rational argument. The Organon begins with the categories, defining the 10 fundamental ways to describe existence: substance, quality, quantity. This established the framework for rational analysis that lasted 2 millennia. The heart of the system is the syllogism, introduced in the prior analytics. This deductive structure ensures a necessary conclusion follows from 2 established premises, providing the architecture of proof. In the work known as the Metaphysics, literally after the physics, Aristotle tackled first philosophy, the fundamental study of existence, or being qua being. He firmly rejected Plato's transcendent forms, insisting that true reality, or substance, resides in the concrete, individual things encountered in the material, observable world. Change is explained through potentiality and actuality of the fully grown oak tree through the inherent process of motion. Every substance is understood through hylomorphism, an inseparable composite of matter, physical stuff, and form, the organizing structure or essence, both necessary for existence. To fully explain any phenomenon, one must invoke the four causes: material, what it is made of; formal, what it is; efficient, what made it; and final, its ultimate purpose or telos. This chain of causation necessitates an ultimate beginning. Aristotle postulates the existence of the prime or unmoved mover, a first principle of pure, eternal actuality. The unmoved mover inspires motion not by physical force, but by attraction, acting as a perfect object of desire or love. Its highest activity is eternal, self-contained thinking of thinking. Aristotle's physics is a philosophical investigation of physis, nature, defined as an internal principle of motion and rest. Natural things possess an innate tendency toward their final form. His physics is fundamentally teleological, seeking the inherent purpose driving all natural processes, such as the acorn growing into the oak tree, because that is its essential nature. Based on observable evidence, he logically constructed his elegant cosmological model, a spherical, stationary Earth resting unmoving at the center of the universe. Surrounding the Earth, the sun, moon, planets, and stars revolved in perfectly circular paths carried by a series of concentric, crystalline spheres, a model dominating Western thought for 2,000 years. The sublunary world, below the moon, was composed of four elements: earth, water, air, fire, each driven by natural, rectilinear motion, earth/water down, air/fire. The celestial regions were made of a fifth, perfect element, the ether, whose inherent, natural motion was eternal circularity, ensuring the unchanging and perfect nature of the heavens. This sophisticated, elegant, and ordered cosmos, though factually incorrect, was a masterpiece of internal logical consistency, derived entirely from the systematic observations available in his era. Moving from the cosmos to human life, Aristotle asked, if the acorn's telos is to be an oak, what is the inherent purpose of a human being? His Nicomachean Ethics defines the ultimate human good as eudaimonia, best translated as human flourishing or living well and doing well, achieved through consistent, rational activity. Eudaimonia is not a passive state or fleeting pleasure, but an ongoing activity of the soul in accordance with virtue, maintained consistently throughout a complete life. The key to moral virtue is the famous doctrine of the mean, where every virtue exists as a midpoint between two corresponding vices, one of excess, one of deficiency. Courage, for example, is the practical mean between the deficiency of cowardice and the excess of recklessness. Generosity lies between stinginess and prodigality. Finding this mean requires practical wisdom, phronesis, the learned ability to perceive and judge the correct course of action suitable for any specific context or situation. This ethical system focuses on developing virtuous character through conscious, repeated action. Virtue is a habit forged through consistent practice, not merely an intellectual concept. He summarized this practical approach: we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit, underscoring the necessity of persistent moral effort. Aristotle saw ethics as inseparable from politics, making the foundational claim in the Politics that man is by nature a political animal, politikon zoon. Humans are inherently social creatures who can only achieve their full potential and the good life, eudaimonia, within the protective and nurturing framework of a polis, or city-state. The state's highest telos is thus not merely to provide security or economy, but to actively facilitate the cultivation of virtue and flourishing among its citizens. Utilizing the vast empirical data collected by the Lyceum, Aristotle provided a systematic, masterful analysis of 158 different forms of government and their structures. He classified regimes based on two criteria: the number of rulers, one, few, many, and whether they ruled in their self-interest or for the common good. Monarchy, rule by one for the common good, is the theoretical ideal. Its deviant, selfish form that aims only at the ruler's benefit is tyranny. Aristocracy, rule by the best few, is the correct form for the few. Its deviant, selfish form that aims at wealth is oligarchy. Polity, a stable, constitutional government empowering the large middle class and mixing elements of other forms, is identified as the best attainable regime in practice. This detailed analysis of constitutional forms, stability, and the role of law provided the indispensable groundwork for all subsequent Western political philosophy. In 323 BC, the intellectual foundation of the Lyceum crumbled when news reached Athens of Alexander the Great's sudden death in Babylon, triggering an immediate anti-Macedonian rebellion. Aristotle, the most prominent Macedonian sympathizer and Alexander's former tutor, instantly became a target for patriotic fury. His enemies moved swiftly to manufacture a charge of impiety, asabeia. The pretext for the charge was Aristotle's decade-old hymn composed for his friend Hermias, which accusers maliciously twisted into the sacrilegious worship of a mortal man, echoing Socrates' trial. Choosing pragmatism over martyrdom, Aristotle fled Athens for the second and final time, refusing to face a show trial he knew he would lose, citing the need to protect philosophy itself. He retreated to Chalcis, his mother's ancestral home on Euboea, famously declaring that he would not permit Athens to sin twice against philosophy, a poignant final commentary on the city. Aristotle died in exile in Chalcis in 322 BC at the age of 62, from a mundane digestive disease. His end was quiet and ignominious, a stark contrast to the grandeur of his life's work. Upon his death, Aristotle bequeathed his precious library, containing his esoteric lecture notes, drafts, and research, to his successor, Theophrastus, securing the physical survival of his deepest thought. The priceless manuscripts were eventually entrusted to Neleus of Skepsis, who moved them to Asia Minor. Fearing confiscation by the rival Attalid kings, Neleus's heirs took drastic measures. Ordinary heirs hid the entire collection of scrolls underground in a damp cellar or trench, preserving them but simultaneously allowing them to slowly decay, ravaged by moisture and insects. For nearly 200 years, c. 286 BC, 100 BC, the foundation of Western science and philosophy lay buried, causing the philosophical world to largely forget his sophisticated treatises, knowing only his literary dialogues. Around 100 BC, the badly damaged scrolls were sold to the wealthy book collector Apellicon of Teos. A pelican had the fragile texts copied, guessing at illegible sections and introducing numerous textual errors. In 86 BC, Roman general Sulla sacked Athens and seized Apollicon's library, shipping Aristotle's damaged works as spoils of war to Rome, where they eventually fell into the hands of scholars. Finally, around 40 BC, the peripatetic philosopher Andronicus of Rhodes undertook the monumental task of organizing, editing, and arranging the salvaged notes into the coherent treatises we know today, creating the Corpus Aristotelicum. After the fall of the Western Roman Empire, Aristotle was largely lost to Latin Europe, known only through two logical works. Syriac and Islamic scholars preserved and translated his entire corpus into Arabic. During Europe's Dark Ages, intellectual centers like Baghdad translated Greek science and philosophy into Arabic. Islamic scholars like Averroes engaged deeply, integrating Aristotle's rational system with theology. The Great Rediscovery occurred in the 12th and 13th centuries, when massive translation movements in Spain and Sicily brought the full rational Aristotle, metaphysics, physics, and ethics back into Latin Europe. The sudden influx of Aristotle's rigorous empiricism and focus on the natural world caused profound shock, initially clashing with the dominant mystical Platonic tradition of the Church. The resolution of this conflict was achieved by St. Thomas Aquinas, 1225 to 1274, who, in his Summa Theologia, masterfully reconciled Aristotelian philosophy with Christian doctrine. Aquinas adopted Aristotle's metaphysical framework, logic, and ethics, demonstrating that reason and faith were harmonious paths to truth, allowing his system to illuminate Christian theology. After Aquinas, Aristotle's triumph was complete. His works became the core curriculum of medieval universities, establishing him as the philosopher, the foundation of all higher Western learning for centuries. This intellectual migration conquered the mind of Europe, creating an empire of thought that was far more durable than Alexander's military conquest, proving that the ultimate triumph belonged to the philosopher.